Smith Show on Indie Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indie Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indie Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indie Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on X__Jonathan Smith to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indie Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. And, of course, 14:30 a.m. as well if you're cruising around the Indianapolis area. Got a nice big show in store for you today. Jake Arthur is going to join the show at 11 to get you ready for Colts versus Broncos. And, of course, Zack Gray at 11:40, the professional sports gambler. He's going to join. He's going to give you some picks. That way you can make a little bit of money this weekend. Colts, Broncos. That is the headliner. Sorry, Indiana State fans. No one cares that you're going to get blown out by IU tonight. Purdue fans, I'm telling you right now, I'm not talking Purdue USC. If you play them close, I will then begin to discuss you just a little bit more often. Okay, like you have to actually win games or be interesting in order for me to talk about you. And I thought this was going to be a really long Colts season, where I thought that they were going to be bad and uninteresting. And the Colts can change that narrative very quickly with a win on Sunday. Coming into the season, it was not uncommon to hear, the big wigs on TV or the big podcasters out there question the Colts over-under to be 7.5 wins. Okay? Me personally, I bet the under, right? But I thought that it'd be like a 7-win team, not a 4-win team. Like we've had people come on this very show to predict. I'm telling you right now, if the Colts win on Sunday, you will be hearing from Zach Pierles of CBS Sports at some point next week. Because he came on this very show and he said, I bet the Colts under 5.5 wins. Okay? So they open the season and they blow out the Dolphins. And they have very quickly grabbed everybody's attention because even bad teams, when you beat them 33-8, like that is interesting, especially when you're a team that everyone thought was going to be bad. So the Colts go out, they run the Dolphins out of Lucas Oil Stadium, and you can see opinions start to begin to change. You begin to hear comments like maybe the system was the issue for Daniel Jones in New York. Maybe Brian Dable was the issue for Daniel Jones in New York. Maybe the Giants just didn't have enough around Daniel Jones when he was up there. This Colts roster is pretty good. Like when you go through and you look at all the weapons and, the offensive line played really well week 1. And, they hired Lou Anarumo, who is supposed to be some defensive genius, the mad scientist, as his former players call him. And you're starting to hear all of these very slow changing opinions start to happen. Ridger chiming in over on YouTube saying that he had 5-12 before the season started, which was not uncommon. It wasn't. But they come out and they dominate week 1 against the Miami Dolphins team that people do expect to be bad. But once again, I said this on Wednesday, teams don't win by 4 possessions in the NFL very often, even when the really good teams beat the really bad teams. The Ravens are 11.5-point favorites over the Browns on Sunday. I'd be very surprised if the Ravens won that game by 4 possessions, even though the Browns are going to be in a race to have the number 1 overall pick this next NFL draft. So for the Colts, they started the year as a team that no one was very interested in. But if they win on Sunday, then you will see people come piling onto the Colts bandwagon. And Shane Steichen, his praises will be sung all over the country Oh, man, Shane Steichen. Did you guys see that Shane Steichen fixed Daniel Jones? I figured he'd be a good head coach because he was such a good offensive coordinator in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. Hey, Chris Ballard, you can say what you want about him, but, the offensive line that he's put together up there in Indy's pretty good. These are all of the things that you will start to hear from people across the country if the Colts are able to find a way to win on Sunday. But they have to win that game in order for people to reach that point and for the narrative around the Colts, which was to start the season, this team's going to be bad. I don't know why the over-under is at 7.5 wins. To this Colts team, they may make the playoffs. They crushed the Dolphins week 1. They beat a really good Broncos team week 2. The issue is I am not convinced that the Colts are going to win this game on Sunday, which is fine. Okay, like the Colts don't have to win this game in order to position themselves to potentially make the playoffs. I'm not going to bet this game just because I feel like I don't really know what the Colts are, and I don't really feel like I know who the Broncos are either. But if I was to bet this game, I would take the Broncos -2.5. I think we walk out of this game, and the consensus opinion is the Dolphins suck. And the Colts are what they've been consistently under Chris Ballard. Average. We're going to walk out of this game. Colts are going to lose by like 6. They'll lose on, a touchdown or something like that. Maybe they lose by 10 because the Broncos hit like a field goal late or something like that to kind of close them out. But I think we're going to walk out of this football game thinking that the Colts are once again a very average football team. Team that's going to go 7-10, 8-9, maybe 9-8. That's how I think we're going to feel because I am still not bought in to Daniel Jones. I am not. And honestly, even if he plays well this week, I probably still won't be bought in. But I just want to see him prove it to me again because in order for the Colts to win this football game on Sunday, Daniel Jones has to have a big day. He has to have a big day. And he's got to show me and everybody else who still doubts him, and rightfully so, might I add, that he didn't have a big day against the Dolphins just because the Dolphins secondary was made up of Swiss cheese. Okay, like he has to show everybody that he is actually improved. He's talked about his time in Minnesota last year and, how he learned a lot from Kevin O'Connell and how they prepare and all these things. And that's great. I love hearing that. I love the idea that Daniel Jones went out there and he found a way to get better. I hope that's true. Man, I hope that's true. With that being said, you've got to prove it. You can't just say that and expect for me to believe it. So I want to see Daniel Jones prove it to me again. And that he's actually a good player now and not that he just tore up a bad Dolphins secondary last week. I also want to see the Colts run defense. This is something that I don't think is being discussed enough. The Dolphins only ran the football 12 times last week. They ran the football 12 times for 78 yards. That is 6.5 yards per carry. The issue is Tua Tagovailoa turned the football over 3 times. And when you turn the football over 3 times and your opponent scores off of all 3 of those turnovers and you look up at the end of the first half and you're down 17-0, it doesn't really matter how well you're running the football. You then begin having to throw the football a lot because that's the only way that you're going to have time to get back into the game. And the run defense for the Colts did not look good against the Miami Dolphins. Now, I will say that Devon Achane is a better running back than anything that the Denver Broncos have. Okay, like the Broncos don't really have a stud at that position. J.K. Dobbins is probably their best running back. He's on a prove-it deal. I know that they drafted a running back. He's a rookie. I don't know. They didn't run the football great against the Titans. But the run defense this week is something that I have been very concerned about all year. And I think this is the first week that we're really going to get to sit back and look at it and figure out if this run defense is going to be good enough or not. Because the secondary, it's going to be fine. I am not concerned about the Colts secondary in the slightest after that performance last week. But I am still very concerned about how Adetomiwa Adebawore is going to look, on the run defense downs when he's in for Grover Stewart, who needs a breather. I'm concerned how Eric Johnson II is going to look when he's in the game for Grover Stewart and he has to defend the run. Okay, I'm concerned about how Zaire Franklin and Joe Bacci are going to look filling the run gaps. Because that's where it all starts. If you allow the other team to run the football on you, you're just not going to get stops. That's the reality of it. And so I'm very intrigued to see how this Colts run defense holds up this week against the Broncos, especially since this is a Broncos offensive line that is supposed to be amongst the best in the NFL. Okay, they were, according to PFF, the fourth best offensive line in the NFL last year, and they brought all those guys back. So that, to me, is the biggest question in this game. How do the Colts fare defending the run? Because I'm telling you right now, the Broncos are going to run the football more than 12 times this week. And if the Colts can hold up and they can stop the run, then you have to feel really good about them getting stops after what we saw from the secondary last week. Those are the two things that I'm unsure of. Will Daniel Jones continue to be great? And can the Colts defend the run? Because they weren't really asked to do that much last week. Now, there are some things that I do just expect for the Colts to do. There's three things that I expect. I expect for Jonathan Taylor to have a big day. You know that as soon as that Colts schedule came out, Jonathan Taylor grabbed that sheet of paper and he started looking on it. And he's like, oh, we got the Broncos week 2. And he circled it immediately. Because last year, he dropped the ball and the Colts playoff hopes on the goal line in Denver. And you just know that has eaten him up ever since it happened. And I expect this week that, if he scores, he's going to be holding that ball high and tight all the way through the back of the end zone. You know that he's been waiting to redeem that tragic mistake that he made last year. Because look, if he doesn't fumble that football, there's a pretty decent chance that the Colts win that game, and then they are then in firm control of their destiny and whether or not they make the playoffs. And I think Jonathan Taylor's going to have a really big game. Part of that is because Dre Greenlaw didn't practice all week for Denver, one of the better linebackers in the NFL. That's big news for Tyler Warren as well. Dre Greenlaw is one of the better coverage linebackers in the NFL on top of it. So it doesn't look like he's going to play. Maybe he does. But if he doesn't, that is a great thing for the Colts, and that is a great thing for Jonathan Taylor, who's going to be looking to get his get back this week against the Broncos team that he made a pretty grave mistake against last week. I also expect for the Colts secondary to continue to be a strength. I know that there are some injuries. Travaris Ward hasn't practiced all week due to the concussion, but Xavier Howard, he's going to play. He looked like a dude last week. Tua didn't even throw it his direction once. Cam Bynum is still healthy. Nick Cross is still healthy. Kenny Moore is still healthy. So the only question is, how is Mekhi Blackman, a guy that the Colts gave up a 6th-round pick for a couple weeks ago, or Jonathan Edwards, whoever ends up sitting in Travaris Ward's spot, how are they going to perform? Now, hopefully, Travaris Ward can clear concussion protocol and he can be good to play in the game. That is obviously the most desirable outcome. But if he can't, I feel pretty good about the other 4 spots in this Colts secondary. The only question is going to be, how was the depth behind them? Because not only is Travaris Ward hurt, Jalen Jones is as well. But we saw this Colts secondary last week really lock down a much more talented receiving core than what Denver has. Like, the combination of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill is significantly better than the combination of Courtland Sutton and Troy Franklin. It just is. And they really struggle to throw the football through the air. So I feel pretty good about the Colts secondary going into the game on Sunday. I also expect for Lou Anarumo to confuse Bo Nix like he did Tua last week. A lot of double pumps, a lot of double checking and being reassured and all that kind of stuff from Tua last week. And now Lou Anarumo is going to get to dial it up against Bo Nix, right? And this is what Lou Anarumo does. He makes quarterbacks think on every single down. And last week, we saw him throw a bunch of different looks at Tua, and it overwhelmed him a bit. That's why he missed 2 blitzes that allowed Nick Cross to get a sack and for Kenny Moore to force a turnover on the strip sack. It's part of why he threw not 1 but 2 interceptions. Just takes him an extra beat to kind of figure out what the Colts are doing. Now, Sean Payton is going to have Bo Nix prepared for Lou Anarumo's defense. But Bo Nix is still a young player. Bo Nix is only in year 2. Lou Anarumo is going to be able to throw things at him that kind of knock him off balance a little bit. Last year, we kind of saw Lou Anarumo do this. Last year, the Broncos played the Bengals. Bo Nix had a pretty average day. 24-31 passing, 219 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Okay, that was against a significantly less talented defense in Cincinnati than what the Colts have right now. So I am interested to see how Lou Anarumo goes about dealing with Bo Nix and this Broncos offense. I think it's going to look very similar to what he did to Miami, show a bunch of different looks, right? You know, crowd the line of scrimmage and then fall out, drop guys like Leatu Latu and Kwity Paye into coverage, blitz from the corner and all that kind of stuff. Like he's going to challenge Bo Nix pre-snap, which I like the idea of challenging a young, second-year quarterback in the NFL pre-snap and making him figure out what the Colts are doing from down to down. So feel very good about that. Feel very good about the secondary and Jonathan Taylor. But ultimately, this game is going to come down to 3 things. 2 of them you can probably guess, but one of them is directly correlated to some struggles that the Colts had last week. I'll tell you what the 3 things are when we come back in 3 minutes.
If you've got a gas-powered engine, keep it running like new at every fill-up. Stable in-season protection is your engine's preventative medicine, cleaning and protecting the entire fuel system in season. In outdoor power equipment, prevent gum and varnish buildup that could cause a rough or non-running engine. For cars and trucks, increase fuel efficiency and power by removing deposits, ensuring your engine's long-term health. Stable outperforms the competition in independent lab testing. So at every fill-up, start with Stable.
Progressive knows if you have to choose between everyday life and your RV wins.
What, are you going to take the RV to the mountains or go pick up your dry cleaning?
RV wins!
Are we cleaning the gutters or taking the RV camping?
RV wins!
Are we getting a new passport or cruising up the coast?
RV wins!
Don't forget, you got that trip to Sweden coming up.
Oh, yeah, passport, then RV.
Yeah!
With Progressive, you can bundle your RV with your home or auto and save with a discount and spend more time enjoying those savings in your RV. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Not available in all states and situations.
If it's in today's sports world, it's here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X__Jonathan Smith to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. And, of course, 1430 AM as well if you're just cruising around the Indianapolis area. Big show today. Jake Arthur joins me coming up here in about 40 minutes, and Zack Gray is set to join me here in about an hour to give out some awesome bets. Like I said, big show today. Colts, big game against the Denver Broncos coming up on Sunday. The Colts are 2.5-point underdogs. And, this game's going to come down to three things. The biggest thing is obviously Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has to be good again. Okay, and when I say that he has to be good again, I don't necessarily mean that he has to put up the same numbers that he did in week 1 against the Dolphins. This is a significantly better defense that he's facing. And so to, sit here and expect for him to, go 22 or 29 for 270 yards and 3 total touchdowns, like that bar is just a bit too high for him. It just is. But when I say that Daniel Jones needs to have a good week again, he just needs to do what he did last week. Can he just execute the offense? Can he just hit the guys that are open? And when there's guys open downfield, can he hit them like the 27-yard touchdown pass that he had to Michael Pittman Jr. last week against the Dolphins. And when it's not there, can he have the patience to just dump the ball off to Jonathan Taylor in the flat and then, let Jonathan Taylor go be Jonathan Taylor, where he makes somebody miss and then he picks up, a first down because he's just really tough to tackle in space? Can he get the Colts into the right play? Can he get the Colts into the right protection? Okay, can he get the Colts to the line of scrimmage on time? Like, I don't know if you watched Bears-Vikings on Monday night, but that was part of the Bears' problem. Like, they would break the huddle with like 10 seconds left on the play clock. In 10 seconds to come up to the line, check the clock, how much time you have, send a guy in motion, figure out what kind of defense, your opposition is running. 10 seconds is not enough time to do that. So can Daniel Jones do all the pre-snap things that he needs to do at a high level like he did against the Dolphins in week 1? If he does, then he's going to give the Colts an excellent chance to win that game on Sunday. The next thing, the red zone offense has to be better. The red zone offense against the Miami Dolphins was not very good. It is one of the very few things that the Colts didn't do very well on Sunday in that win. Only scoring 2 touchdowns on 5 red zone possessions against a bad defense is not a good sign for things to come. So this week, I expect to see a lot more Tyler Warren targets in the red area. He didn't have one against the Dolphins. And I hope that the Colts can find a way to run the football a little more efficiently in the red zone than what they did last week against the Dolphins. Okay, they averaged a whopping 3 yards per carry in the red zone last week, and that is after removing the 3 quarterback sneaks from Daniel Jones. So they have got to find a way to run the football a bit more efficiently. Also, this always matters. Look, a large reason why the Colts won the way that they did last week is because the defense forced three turnovers. That helps. Okay, I'm telling you, if the Colts force 3 turnovers again this week, they will win the football game. If they win the turnover battle 3-0, they will 1,000% win that game. I have no doubt about it in my mind. So turnovers, Daniel Jones just doing the things that starting quarterbacks do and occasionally hitting the big play when it's there, and the red zone offense being a little more efficient than what it was against Miami. If the Colts can do those 3 things, then they're going to have a great chance to win on Sunday at home and improve to 2-0 for the first time in a very, very long time. Now, there are some issues for the Colts this week. And by issues, I mean injuries. Leatu didn't practice yesterday because he hurt his hamstring, I believe, in practice earlier in the week. That's not a good thing. I have ranted multiple times about the lack of depth on the Colts defensive front. Okay, behind Leatu is 30-year-old Samson Ebukam, who's coming off an Achilles tear. And then the other guy behind him is Tyquan Lewis, who's 30 years old, coming off of very serious elbow surgery. So that's not a good thing. Hopefully, he can, nurse his hamstring up and be ready to go so he can play at least a little bit this week against the Broncos, because the Colts are going to need him pass rushing off the edge if they want to impact Bo Nix without having to blitz. And then, of course, Jalen Jones and Charvarius Ward haven't practiced all week. Those are, cornerbacks 1 and 3 for the Colts. Jalen Jones is still nursing his hamstring, and then Charvarius Ward is in concussion protocol. That Mekhi Blackmon trade that Chris Ballard made is going to come into, effect pretty early here, because he's probably going to get the nod. It's going to be him or Jonathan Edwards. I'll talk to Jay Garther about that coming up here in about 30 minutes. He was at all the practices and things this week, so he'll probably have a better idea on that than I do. So injuries starting to stack up. The Colts, only 3 isn't bad. The Broncos really only have 1. So, and that one is Dre Greenlaw. Everyone else seems to be healthy for them. So, once again, Jake Arthur coming up here in about 30 minutes. We'll he'll have a better idea on the roster and depth chart and how the Colts are going to make those moves. Last thing here on the Colts, and I was thinking about this last night. I don't know if you watch the Packers play the Colts, but the Packers remind me so much of the Colts. Not in terms of the Colts are good enough to win the Super Bowl this year, but just the roster construction. The Packers are good every year. Okay, they won again last night. They're now 2-0. And when you look up and down their roster, they have just a ton of B- to B+ players. And the Colts are the exact same way. Like you look up and down the roster, and it's a lot of like B- to B+ players. And then you go back to the Packers, and they're like legitimate Super Bowl contenders now because Jordan Love has turned into an A- quarterback, and they went and they made a trade for Micah Parsons, one of the 5 best defensive players in the NFL. And when I look at the Colts, by the way, before the Packers made that trade, their over-under total for the year was 9.5, and obviously it jumped after they made the Parsons trade. But when I look at the Colts, it feels like they're just a step away from that. Like they don't have any real superstars. Like they have players that are obviously good. Like, DeForest Buckner, he's a B+ player. Michael Pittman Jr., he's a B+ player. Jonathan Taylor's a B+, maybe an A- running back. Quentin Nelson is obviously an A+ guy, but you need A+ dudes at skill positions. And that's really what the Colts are missing. And when I look at the Packers, I see so much of the Colts, right? Like the offensive line is always good. Like they have a ton of good receivers that are kind of specialists, very similar to the Colts. And then they've got a young guy from Texas that they're hoping kind of blossoms into a real star. That's how the Colts wide receiver room is. And so the Colts just feel like they're like 2 players away. One guy at quarterback, which would be really tough to find, unless Daniel Jones ends up being that guy. And then one real impact player on the defensive side of the football, more specifically at edge rusher. Okay, and Leatu Latu was hopefully going to be that guy, but if he didn't play this week, he probably won't be this year. So we'll see. But I just feel like this Colts roster is so close. Like they're constantly 8-9 or 9-8, and it feels like they're just an elite quarterback and an elite pass rusher away from kind of breaking through and getting to that 12-5 mark relatively consistently. And hopefully Shane Steichen can develop Daniel Jones to a point where he can be that A- quarterback. I don't know if you watched Jordan Love last night. He didn't do anything super special. He just hit the open guy. When the check down was available, he hit that. And then, defensively, like that Packers defense is just nasty. So fast, so physical. Micah Parsons just making it easier for everybody else. And that's what the Colts don't have. They don't have a guy that just makes everything easier for everybody else. Because like when you have Micah Parsons, like you have to double that guy. The Colts don't have a guy that it's like, yeah, I have to double him. As good as DeForest Buckner is, he's probably that guy. But, if it was Micah Parsons or Jalen Carter, this Colts defense would go to a whole different level. So I was just watching last night, and that thought kind of came to my mind. And I was like, I should probably share that tomorrow. Because it does feel like this Colts roster is pretty close to breaking through and being potentially a Super Bowl contending roster. Obviously, Daniel Jones has to continue to progress, and they've got to find a real stud on defense that makes everything easier for everyone else. But this Colts roster, it's solid. We're going to see if it's solid enough to beat the Broncos on Sunday. Jake Arthur joining me at 11 to talk about the game, and then Zack Gray is going to join at 11:40 to give out bets. Speaking of bets, I've got a lot of bets to give out this week. A lot of really good and interesting college football games. And then, of course, 5 NFL bets, as always, every Friday, as we do here on The Real Jonathan Smith Show. And I will give you all these bets in 4 minutes.
Dockage at noon. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Now, this is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on X__Jonathan Smith to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on the Indy Sports Ticket app or 1430 AM if you're cruising around the Indianapolis area. Jake Arthur from at.on Colts is joining me coming up here in about 20 minutes. And then Zack Gray joins me here in about an hour to give out some bets. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I got a lot of bets this weekend. Just a lot of interesting games between college football Saturday and, of course, the NFL on Sunday. Start with the games tomorrow. Clemson's only getting 3.5 points on the road against Georgia Tech. I like Georgia Tech. I like Haynes King, just a big, tough, physical quarterback who just kind of puts his body on the line every week. It's awesome to see. And Clemson had a really bad week last week. They host Troy. They're down 16-0 at halftime. Things are just looking not very good. And I like betting on teams, good teams with good quarterbacks and good coaches after they don't play up to their standard the week prior. This Clemson team is very talented. I picked them to win the national title before the year started. I think they respond in a big way, and they go into Atlanta, play Georgia Tech, and beat them by at least 2 touchdowns. I don't think that this game is going to be close. I think that Clemson bounces back in a very, very big way. The big SEC matchup of the day is Georgia taking on Tennessee. Top 15 matchup. 2 teams that don't really like each other. And Georgia's a 4.5-point favorite. I'm not going to bet this game. I'm not betting this game. But if I was to bet it, I would take Georgia just because I think they're the better football team. Winning on the road at Neyland Stadium is tough. Tennessee appears to be a little bit better than what everyone projected them to be. You know, they had all the offseason drama with Nico Iamaleava and who's going to play quarterback. They get this App State transfer who went to UCLA, and then he goes from UCLA to Tennessee, and he's kind of showed up, and he's ran the offense really well, throws a nice deep ball, which is a very important part of the Tennessee offense. So going to be very interesting. First real test for both teams. I know Tennessee beat Syracuse to open the season, but no, Syracuse barely beat UConn. I don't know. So first real test for both teams. Very excited to figure out just how good each of them are. Miami, 5th ranked Miami takes on 18th ranked USF, South Florida. Only team in the country with not 1 but 2 top 25 wins. Beating the crap out of Boise State week 1, and then going on the road to Gainesville, Florida, going into the swamp and winning that game 20-18. Bad news, though. The Cinderella run ends here. Florida was overrated coming into the year, like they are every year. Okay? Like their name's Florida, so they are immediately just gifted this top 15 ranking. All right? Anyone who knows college football knew that Florida wasn't going to be one of the 15 best teams in the country this year. Miami, with the way that Carson Beck is playing, they might be a top 5 team in college football. The defense looks better. The pass catchers that all transferred in look pretty good. Carson Beck seems to have a real nice command of that offense, and that Miami offensive line, nasty, as they always are under Mario Cristobal. The only issue with betting on Miami is you are betting on Mario Cristobal, a guy who is sadly very well known for making mistakes in terms of late game clock management. So I would take Miami minus 17.5, but that is a lot of points to entrust to Mario Cristobal, who, as I said, kind of has a history of, giving games away late. This game, I'm absolutely betting, even though I don't want to. Sometimes you open up whatever app you're choosing, BetMGM, Bet365, FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever it is. And you see a number. And it's like, I'm obviously going to be on one side or the other. And I used to do that And then I'd make the bet, and the bet would always lose. And I have not learned my lesson. I opened up my FanDuel app last night, and I was like, South Carolina is only a 3.5-point favorite at home against Vanderbilt. It's like that number seems way too good to be true. Way too good to be true. But I'm going to bet it anyway. South Carolina, I think, is going to dog walk Vanderbilt. Okay, I get it. Everyone likes Vanderbilt, a little underdog team that doesn't really win much. They made a bowl game last year, and everyone's excited. Diego Pavia, everyone likes him and all that kind of stuff. With that being said, talent is still what wins football games in college football. And I'm betting on the top-end talent of South Carolina to be so much better than Vanderbilt's that they end up winning this game by 10 points or more. Vanderbilt's going to be tough. They're going to be scrappy. Pavia, he's going to make plays because that's just kind of what he does. But one man alone is usually not enough to win road games in the SEC, unless you're Cam Newton or Tim Tebow or somebody like that. And I do like Diego Pavia, but come on now. He's not Cam Newton or Tim Tebow or Johnny Manziel or anyone like that who's come through the SEC. So give me South Carolina minus 3.5 against Vanderbilt. Last game of the night, Notre Dame fans, you know that I don't like you. I am not a Notre Dame fan. I've grown up despising Notre Dame. And no, I'm not an Indiana or a Purdue fan. But I am taking Notre Dame minus 6.5 against Texas A&M. Because Texas A&M is just cursed for one reason or another. Doesn't really seem to matter who their head coach is, whether it's Mike Elko, who's their head coach now, or, Jimbo Fisher. They just don't win games like this or games like these. They'll make a dumb mistake in there somewhere, and that'll cost them, and they'll lose by 7 to 10 points. And everyone will feel good about Notre Dame again, and they'll say that they're back on track because they beat Texas A&M. Once again, a team that doesn't really seem to win games like that one. So those are my 5 bets this week for college football. We're taking Clemson minus 3.5, Georgia minus 4.5, Miami minus 17.5, South Carolina minus 3.5, and Notre Dame minus 6.5. All favorites. That's probably not a good thing, but hey, we'll see what happens. Next, 5 NFL bets. Really good week last week. I think I went 3-2 last week on my bets. Hard not to feel good about that. If we can keep it at 3-2 every single week, then we're going to have a very profitable season on our hands here in Indy and here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Just wish that Zack Gray could have been on last week because I probably would have been able to get him in our sharp versus square stuff. But that's all right. That's all right. So 5 NFL bets. The first one, it's my favorite one. The Patriots are getting 1.5 on the road against the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins have played one game this year here in Indy, and they lost. And it resulted in them having a players-only meeting, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, players-only meetings happen all the time. They just don't usually happen after the first game of the season. That, to me, is a major red flag. And let's just be honest, this Miami Dolphins team has had a bunch of issues all year long. All year long, they've had nothing, or all offseason long, nothing but issues. Tyreek Hill getting in trouble. He wants to be traded. He and Tua not on the same page. Just nothing but issues between the two of them. And I don't think that they're going to be fixed. The Dolphins seem done. Mike McDaniel seems done. Opens up his press conference with things can't be any worse than what they are right now. They can. You could get fired. So I'm going to bet against them as often as I can with Mike McDaniel as their head coach. So I'm going to take the Patriots plus 1.5 on the road against the Dolphins. My only hesitancy with this is it's really tough for these northern teams to go down into Florida in September and win games just because it's so hot and humid. And even if you get down there early, like, your body's not really going to adjust to that. So that's my one concern. But give me the Patriots, the better coach team that's actually playing for something, compared to a Dolphins team that seems like they just wanted to skip this entire season. So Patriots plus 1.5. Chiefs versus Philly. I'm going to take the Chiefs plus 1.5. I get it. No Rashee Rice. I almost called him Miles Rice, but that's the point guard for the Maryland Terrapins. He's not playing. He's suspended. It doesn't look like Xavier Worthy's going to play either. But the Chiefs are at home, and I will always bet Patrick Mahomes when he is a home underdog. I will take it every single time, backs against the wall, trying not to start 0-2, a team with big aspirations, right? Even though if they do start 0-2, I still won't really be worried about them because they are who they are. Like, they are the Kansas City Chiefs. They could definitely be the fourth team ever to start 0-2 and still win the Super Bowl. Philly, really good team, but I'm going to take the Chiefs just because they're at home, and I really just like the fact that I'm getting points while betting on Patrick Mahomes. So give me the Chiefs plus 1.5 against Philly. I'm also going to take the Bears plus 6.5 against the Lions. I don't think the Bears are bad. And that's probably an uncommon take right now. Everyone saw them and Caleb Williams fall apart in the fourth quarter of that Monday Night Football game. And now everyone's overreacting and, talking about how bad the Bears are and how Ben Johnson's not going to be able to fix Caleb Williams. And I thought Caleb Williams was good. They just had too many pre-snap penalties. Felt like every time the Bears had something going in the second half, they'd have a false start, there'd be a bad holding call, and then that would kind of ruin their drive. So if they can clean up the penalties, look, 12 penalties for 127 yards, that's going to get you beat every single time. So if they can clean that up, then they'll be fine. The Lions have issues as well. Both new coordinators. It's their first time really being coordinators. And they didn't look very good week one against the Green Bay Packers. So neither team impressed in week one. I think 6.5 is just way too many points for a Lions team that just looks disjointed and disorganized. Also, Jared Goff, 0-18-1 in games where offensive plays are not called by Ben Johnson or Sean McVay. So feel free to keep that in mind as well. Give me the Rams minus 5.5 on the road against the Titans. The Rams are simply a much better team than the Titans. Give me the Browns plus 11.5 against Baltimore. They're on the road, and I know that, the Browns for some reason are talking a ton. You got Jerry Jeudy saying that the Ravens secondary isn't that good, and you've got Grant Delpit saying that Derrick Henry's not that hard to tackle and all that kind of stuff, which kind of makes me nervous for the game. But 11.5 points in a divisional game is a lot. Divisional games, especially in that division, tend to be close, even though the Browns are bad. I like having 5 NFL bets every week. I didn't like any of the other ones, so I decided to go with this one just because 11.5 points, that's a lot of points to cover, especially for a Baltimore team that really enjoys blowing leads late in games. Now, we always close the gambling segment with our Kirk Cousins bet of the week. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's try that again. We always close this segment with our Kirk Cousins bet of the week.
Walk into your trap, take over your trap was the line he would say. Do you go into someone else's stadium and you try to assert yourself?
Kirk Cousins bet of the week, walk in your trap, take over your trap. So for the new listeners, basically every Friday we take a road underdog on the money line. We missed last week. Last week I took the Dolphins. I also told you to take the Raiders. That one hit. So technically we're 1-1, but I'm going to go with 0-1 because my official pick was the Dolphins over the Colts. This week, Patriots money line plus 1.5 on the road against the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins just seem done. They just seem like they want to go home and not play football anymore, even though we're only one game into the season. So people up there just seem unhappy, and I like the idea of betting against unhappy people who know that they're going to be fired or traded at some point during the season. Those are all of our bets for the weekend. When we come back, 11 o'clock, the one and only Jake Arthur is going to join the show. Very excited to have him on. We're going to continue talking Broncos and Colts. just kind of the things that he's looking for in this game, how he expects for the Colts to attack the Broncos, some of his questions and concerns. Very excited to talk to him. Every time he's on, he always does a really good job. So when we come back, Jake Arthur will be on the line.
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Hour number 2 getting underway here as I get you ready for Colts and Broncos. Now joined by the one and only Jake Arthur, who does an excellent job covering the Colts. Check him out on X at Jake Arthur NFL. By the way, Jake, congrats on the new gig. Now the Colts beat writer for the Round Table Network, and he also hosts the Locked On Colts podcast with Zach Hicks. Jake, what's going on, man? How are you?
Thank you. I am awesome. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm ready for Sunday because I don't like how do you feel about Sunday? Because I'm at this point where I kind of thought that the Colts were going to be like a 6 or 7 win team. And then they win a football game by 4 possessions, which just doesn't happen in the NFL. And now they've really got my attention for the first time in the last few years. How do you kind of feel about the Colts going into this game?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it just because I think we're going to find out a lot about this team on Sunday. I think we found out a good bit last Sunday that they can at least beat the bad teams that they're going to be up against. They match up well. I thought Sunday was a good marriage of really good coaching and preparation met with the players' execution of those game plans. So I feel really positive about that. And to this point now, it's just kind of digging in and finding out more about individual areas. Like, is the offensive line going to hold up and continue to play at a high level? Because I think if they do that, if the offensive line is one of those positive things we saw that's legit, I think it's going to kind of raise the floor of the entire team because, the defense was good. The play calling was good. The quarterbacking was good, but we don't know that all those things are going to hold up throughout the year. But I do think a mark of a good team is a good offensive line. And we've seen, like, you look at the Chiefs, for example, in the Super Bowl, the downfall of their team was the offensive line once they could no longer deal with the injuries and everything. So offensive line play is very, very crucial, and they're going to get a huge test because Denver arguably had the best pass rush in the NFL last year. And when you look at the matchup from last year, it was Anthony Richardson back there. And I mean, he's not the quarterback now, but he is able to avoid sacks about as well as any other quarterback in the entire NFL. And I think Jones won't be as effective in that area, just coming down to like literally having pass rushers in his lap. But I think the big difference with him will be like distributing the ball quickly, getting it to where it needs to go. Because Shane Steichen did tailor a passing game to Jones last week that did not ask a lot of Jones, except for to get rid of the ball quickly in the right place within his first read or two. So I'm just looking to see what's legit and what's not from all of the positive things that we saw last week.
Joined by Jake Arthur, host of Locked On Colts and the Colts beat writer for the Round Table Network. I think the biggest thing that I'm kind of looking forward to figuring out about this Colts team, because I do think you're 100% right when you say that we're going to learn a lot about them. The Dolphins only ran the football 12 times last week, and they averaged 6.5 yards per carry. The run defense for the Colts was my biggest concern on the defensive side of the football, just because the backup defensive tackles aren't exactly great run stoppers. I still have questions about what the Colts have at linebacker. What do you kind of expect to see from the Colts run defense this week?
Yeah, Denver's run game is going to be more power-based than Miami's, and it's not as explosive as, they don't have a guy like Devon Achane there. But at the same time, I feel like you and I have discussed it at least once or twice that, yeah, the run defense should be considered a big question mark for the reasons really you said. Like, when you take DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart off the field, your opponent should always see that as an opportunity to attack, because you look at, Adetomiwa Adebawore, he's getting blown off the block, and Neville Gallimore is not necessarily the best run defender in the league either. And so you just got to get more there. This may resolve itself if Laiatu Latu isn't able to play. But I think you have got to have guys like JT Tuimoloau has to play. He's was a solid run defender in college, and he looked pretty good in the preseason as well. I know they're worried about sacrificing some things inside, and they want to play a lot of their defensive tackles, but that's one of your defensive linemen that's a better run defender. So I think personnel-wise, they have to play this smart and know that Denver is trying to establish its own identity as a power run team with Bo Nix kind of playing off of that. So yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think the linebackers as well. Zaire Franklin is, overall a positive run defender, but I still think we're waiting to find out a lot about Joe Bocci and Cam McGrone as well.
Totally agree. Who do you think is, so it looks like Tavarius Ward isn't going to play. He hasn't cleared concussion protocol quite yet. Who do you think gets that start at outside corner?
I think if Ward is unable to go, that it's most likely going to be Mekhi Blackman that gets the nudge. Either him and Jonathan Edwards. It was kind of Blackman that saw a little bit of work when Ward left initially with what appeared to be an arm injury. Very curious to see though, because Blackman is listed as the backup nickel behind Kenny Moore, while Jonathan Edwards has been pretty exclusively a boundary cornerback. So curious to see with a full week to prepare what they do with that. I do expect both Edwards and Blackman to play and probably take turns replacing Ward if he's unable to go.
That makes sense. What do you think the reasoning was behind JT Tuimoloau not playing a snap against the Dolphins?
Yeah, so we asked about that because when the inactives came out, that was a really curious decision to me because obviously he's a second-round pick. It looked like he had a pretty good summer, and it's not like you're really flush with pass rushers either. But when we asked, both Shane Steichen and Lou Anarumo both basically said they really wanted to go heavy with the defensive tackles in that game. And it just kind of wound up being a numbers game because Tuimoloau is the fifth defensive end. And I think they expected Miami to try and attack them up the middle. And so they needed more interior defenders to do that. Lou Anarumo said it really had nothing to do with Tuimoloau. It was just the personnel they chose to go with, which I believe because we've had to ask that question before. And coaches usually say, he's not quite ready yet. We're waiting for more consistency and stuff. They didn't say anything like that. Anarumo even said, it has nothing to do with JT. We love JT. It's just the personnel we kind of had to go with in that matchup. So I would personally like to see him get out there more because you like Tyquan Lewis, you like Samson Ebukam, but you just spent an early round draft pick on this guy who looked pretty promising in the summer. And I mean, he's going to need more snaps to acclimate to the NFL. So if I were them, I absolutely would have him out there this week.
Joined by Jake Arthur, host of the Locked On Colts podcast and also the Colts beat writer for the Roundtable Network. So I don't expect for Daniel Jones to go 22 of 29 for 270 yards and three total touchdowns against this Broncos defense. You don't have to give me stats per se, but what do you want to see from Daniel Jones to feel like he has improved from the guy that he was in New York?
Yeah, we've discussed this a lot on Locked On Colts recently this week. So it is unrealistic to expect those kind of figures from Jones each week because that would essentially make him an all-pro this year. So I think really what you're looking for is just efficiency and kind of pulling the strings of what Steichen is asking him. And I kind of mentioned earlier, Steichen isn't asking him – he's not asking the world of Jones. He's giving him very quick reads to execute. You could even really see it even in the misses that Jones had. Like he's throwing the ball really before he's analyzed where it's supposed to go, and it almost got him in trouble a few times. But they're making sure Jones is just getting rid of the ball quickly. He's spreading it around. But I think also having a guy like Tyler Warren is a huge X factor in that because it allows Jones to go through a couple reads and get the ball downfield over the middle of the field with, an opportunity for yards after the catch. You can find him in the post. You can find him on those corner routes that they love so much. So I would expect them pretty much every week to invest heavily in those RPOs and just the really quick reads, but also to have Tyler Warren maybe as your top pass target most weeks.
Yeah, having Tyler Warren, it's just so nice to have a guy who seems like he's going to be able to control the middle of the field. Like I felt like every target for him last week was him somewhere over the middle. I was kind of surprised, though, that I don't think he got one target when the Colts were in the red zone, and the red zone offense wasn't very good last week against the Dolphins. What do you think needs to kind of change for the Colts to get, a few more touchdowns and a few less field goals?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Warren is probably the guy that you want to have kind of the straw that stirs the drink in the red zone. Like, he did so much of it in college, and we're seeing the Colts do a lot of things with him that he did in college. So I think they're still kind of trying to figure some things out. But, using Warren more in the red zone, definitely using Josh Downs as well. Like, you really have one guy who's constantly on the field who is a quick one-on-one matchup winner, and that's Josh Downs. You could also consider that Tyler Warren as well. But Downs is a guy who, if you're just crunched in there, you only have a couple yards to make something work, he can get that smallest crease to get open and get you in the end zone. So I would involve Josh Downs much more. Jones is really, really good at the quarterback sneak as well. So if you're knocking on the goal line, that's pretty clearly a good option. But no, I would allow Warren to kind of use his ability to kind of seek out the soft spots in the zones. I get him more involved, and I would definitely rely more on Josh Downs, especially with his option routes.
Joined by Jake Arthur, host of the Locked On Colts podcast and the Colts beat writer for the Roundtable Network, talking Colts and Broncos. Who do you think the Broncos put Patrick Surtain on?
I don't think the Colts are a team where you're going to have your top cornerback following anyone. So I think Surtain will probably mostly stay on a particular side of the field. But I do think they want to have Michael Pittman Jr. probably as the top priority on the passing game for Surtain, because he plays on the outside. So, with Josh Downs, they'll line up their nickel guy on him. And then Alec Pierce, they're going to be aware of what he can do downfield. But Pittman is your guy that kind of does a little bit of everything and is going to be most commonly on the field. So while I don't think they're going to have Surtain shadow Pittman, I do think they'll probably have him aware of where Pittman is most times. And honestly, when Tyler Warren splits out wide, I would not be shocked to see them matched up a couple times together either.
That would make sense. Having a guy like that just makes playing defense so much easier. But I am very intrigued by the Lou Anarumo versus Sean Payton kind of matchup game within the game. I thought Lou Anarumo did a really good job last week of confusing Tua, making him hold the ball a little bit longer, kind of changing the picture from pre-snap to post-snap. What do you think Lou Anarumo is going to have in store for Bo Nix this week?
Yeah, so I thought when I was watching the 2024 matchup back, and it as static and kind of unimaginative as Gus Bradley's defense was at times, it actually did look a lot like what Lou was doing last week against the Dolphins, kind of creating some exotic, interesting fronts on the defensive line, having guys stand up, not knowing where the blitzer's coming from, having some guys drop into coverage a little bit as well. So honestly, I would just imagine Lou would do a lot of the same stuff he did last week, because the Colts defense held up really, really well against Denver's offense last year up until the dam kind of broke at the end. They started turning the ball over and it all just kind of unraveled. But I think if you move guys around and just disguise your coverages and keep guys moving into different spots, that did appear to work pretty well against Bo Nix, because that was Nix's worst game in quite a while when they faced off last year. So you mentioned the Sean Payton, Lou Anarumo thing. I think it's going to be a very interesting matchup because they both kind of philosophically are the same. They don't stick to certain systems, and they're not like very static in, they don't just hammer the same things all the time. They do a lot of things that are dependent on the looks their opponent are giving them. So this is going to be a huge play calling game, I think, for both sides, because neither of them are predictable. They always go off of what their opponent's doing for the most part, and that's like the way to attack them. So this is going to be a super interesting chess match, I think, and I'm excited because I thought both Lou and Shane Steichen, to his credit, I thought both of the Colts play callers just pitched an absolute ace of a game last week.
Joined by Jake Arthur, host of the Locked On Colts podcast and a Colts beat writer for the Roundtable Network, talking Colts and Broncos. game on Sunday. Colts are 2.5-point underdogs at home. Last thing for you, Jake, and I will let you go. Very rarely do I go into any sort of game and feel like something very specific is going to happen. But this week, I really feel like Jonathan Taylor is going to have a big day. Doesn't seem like Dre Greenlaw is going to play. You know, he remembers dropping the football last year. What are you kind of expecting from Jonathan Taylor in this game?
I think he'll have a pretty decent game. They found a good recipe against Denver last year, even though Denver's got a good defensive front. I thought they attacked them. You know, they used a lot of like pistol and shotgun and RPO stuff, a lot of misdirection. A lot of time when they ran the ball, it was not just like classic single back running looks. It was very almost collegiate in the way they attacked Denver's defensive front. So I thought that was probably a good way to go, especially they seem susceptible over the middle of the field as well. I think that's kind of where you got to attack Denver's defense. So if they can keep Denver's defense guessing, it's a little different when you've got Daniel Jones out there at quarterback versus Anthony Richardson. I do think that created a lot of opportunities for Taylor last year, but at the same time, just keep it interesting. A lot of misdirection and run from the pistol and things like that. I would get a lot of zone blocking going from your offensive linemen, get some of those guys pulling as well. Just keep them spread out and keep them guessing. I do think Taylor can have a big game. He's kind of downplaying it. He was asked about, you know, if he's looking for any redemption or anything from that gaffe last year where he dropped the ball, and he was like, no, I'm intrinsically motivated. I'm always motivated. I don't need something like that to do it. But at the same time, the very next week last year after that Denver game, you could very clearly tell he was joking around about it. Like he had a couple touchdowns and he like ran through the tunnel holding onto the ball with both hands and everything. So he's a guy that's going to always downplay it, but he's aware. I think he's probably got this one circled and wants to prove, he probably wants to erase that dark moment from his resume from last year.
Probably. That's how I feel about it. And the only way to do that is to have a really big day. Jake, thanks for your time, man. When are you going to have something up for the Roundtable Network?
Yep. So I put a couple things up this morning, talking about, you know, DeForest Buckner mentioned he's just having a lot of fun in this defense. He's being used in some creative ways. I wrote about Jonathan Taylor not looking for redemption this morning. It's probably going to be heavily reliant on injuries the rest of the day. We'll talk to Shane Steichen here in a couple hours. We need to know more about Laiatu Latu and Charvarius Ward. So I'll be talking about injuries coming up here in the next couple hours. We've got practice in about an hour as well. So we'll keep putting a bow on this week of preparation for Colts and Broncos here throughout the afternoon.
Sounds good. Thanks for your time, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That is Jake Arthur. You can check him out on X at Jake Arthur NFL. Does a great job covering the Colts. Make sure you go read all of his writing and check out the Locked On Colts podcast as well. Both Jake and Zach Hicks, two very good friends of the show. When we come back, Colts could change the narrative very quickly with a win. I'll tell you about it in 4 minutes.
may one day be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt. Uh-oh.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on X, __ Jonathan Smith to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. And, of course, you can also listen on 1430 AM if you're in your car around the Indianapolis area. Zack Gray joining the show here in about 15 minutes. He's going to give out some bets, and we'll argue, as we always do, about something, because that's just kind of the way that things seem to go whenever he comes on the show. So that'll be fun. Sunday should also be fun. You know, I talked about this on Monday, but for the first time in a while, the Colts played a football game, and I had like a really fun time watching the football game. Like that has not been the experience watching the Colts play football over the past couple of years. You know, a lot of frustration with Anthony Richardson, you know, not developing the way that people want for him to. Frustration with the quarterback situation, flip-flopping back and forth between Flacco and Richardson last year, 2 years ago. Everyone's kind of ready for the rookie year of Anthony Richardson, and he gets hurt, and it ends up being Gardner Minshew. And, you know, Minshew did a good job, but it wasn't really what we wanted. But this year, it just feels a little bit different. You know, like I said, I had fun watching the Colts play football for the first time in a minute. And I really want that to continue on Sunday. Coming into the season, it wasn't super uncommon to hear people take the under on the Colts 7.5 wins. I was one of them. You know, I was like, hey, you know, they're probably going to win 7 games. Like that's kind of where I had them, because this is a good roster, but not really a great one. And I had a lot of questions about Daniel Jones and the rest of these guys. So, or not the rest of these guys, but I had some questions about the defense. And then they come out week 1, and they just absolutely dominate. You know, beat the Dolphins 33-8. You know, they won the game by 4 possessions, which is a very uncommon occurrence in the NFL. Like, teams don't win games by 4 possessions. I mean, the Ravens, you know, a team good enough to win the Super Bowl, they're going to play the Browns, a team that's going to be in contention for the number 1 overall pick this year. They're going to play them on Sunday, and I'd be very surprised if the Ravens won that game by 4 possessions. So the fact that the Colts did that to a Dolphins team that's got some talent on it, it speaks volume about what they could potentially be this year. Now, the Dolphins could just be done. You know, they already had a players-only meeting. That's usually not a good sign to have one this early in the season. So we're going to find out quite a bit about the Colts this Sunday when they take on the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix and Sean Payton in that very nasty, nasty defense. And you can already kind of feel the narrative changing. You know, like whispers of, you know, maybe Daniel Jones wasn't the issue in New York. Maybe it was Brian Dable. Maybe it was the offensive line. Maybe it was the lack of weapons that they gave him. And, you know, the Colts roster is pretty good, and I like their receivers. And Lou Anarumo, he's a defensive genius. You know, there's a reason why players called him the mad scientist when he was in Cincinnati. And you're starting to hear all these things kind of get floated around, and I'm doing my best to not buy in, because I do like being the guy that's 15 minutes late to the party, not 15 minutes early. But man, if they win this week, it's going to be really hard not to hop on that Colts bandwagon. Because that's immediately what's going to happen. If the Colts start 2-0, they will very quickly grab the attention, not only of everyone here in Indy, but also from a national media standpoint. Because they're going to be like, look at this Colts team. Like, blew out the Dolphins, beat a Broncos team that some people have winning the AFC West over the Chiefs. Like those 2 wins would be a very big deal. Everyone would be back in on Shane Steichen. People would start talking about Daniel Jones as, this year's Sam Darnold or Geno Smith. But in order for that to happen, they have to win the game. That's where it all starts. And I'm not convinced that they're going to do that. They're 2.5-point dogs at home. I'm not betting the game just because I don't really know what we're going to get from the Colts, and I don't really know what we're going to get from Denver. I think I know, but I'm just not confident enough to put currency on it. But if I was to bet, I would take the Broncos minus 2.5. I think we're going to walk out of this game, and the consensus opinion is going to be that the Dolphins suck and that the Colts are what they've always been under Chris Ballard. Very average. We're going to walk out of this game and be like, 8-9, 9-8, 7-10. If things don't go our way, that kind of seems like what this Colts team is going to be. Average. Another year of average Colts football is still kind of what I feel like we're in store for. But if you win this game, that changes opinions very, very quickly. And it's all going to start with Daniel Jones. I want Daniel Jones to prove me wrong again. I thought he'd struggle a little bit against Miami. Part of that's because I thought that the Miami pass rush would be better than what it was, so credit to the Colts offensive line. But I want him to have a big day where he shows me that he didn't have a big day against Miami just because the Miami Dolphins secondary is made up of an undrafted free agent at corner, a rookie 6th-round pick at nickel, and a 4th-round pick from 2022 who played for the Raiders last year and is now on his 3rd team. Patriots, Raiders, and now the Dolphins. Like, show that you've actually improved. He went on some show and talked about how much he learned when he was in Minnesota and the preparation and all that kind of stuff. And, that's great. I love hearing that. But you got to do it more than once in order for me to buy into whatever it is that you're selling. So I really want to see Daniel Jones prove me wrong again. I'm very intrigued to see what this Colts run defense is going to look like. The Dolphins only ran the football 12 times last week, and they averaged 6.5 yards per carry. 12 carries for 78 yards. That's not a good number for this Colts run defense that had its concerns before the year started. So chances are the Broncos are going to run the football more than 12 times. And so we're going to get our first real look at this Colts run defense, and I hope it's good because it didn't look great against Miami. I've still got questions about Joe Bacci and Zaire Franklin and the backup defensive tackles behind Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner, because when those guys are off the field, offensive coordinators get excited and they say, all right, we're going to be able to run the football now. And the Colts have to have someone come into the game and put a stop to that. And I just don't think that Eric Johnson or Adetomiwa Adebawore are going to be those guys. Those guys can rush the passer. If they're in on 3rd down for Grover Stewart, I don't really mind it. But they've got to find a way to stop the run. It is the most important thing for me in this game, because as much as I like the Colts secondary, every game starts on the ground. If you can't stop the run, you can't stop anybody. And that is the biggest question that I have coming into this game, and I'm very intrigued to see how the Colts answer the bell, especially since the Broncos' offensive line is elite, supposed to be amongst the best in the NFL. The biggest question for the Colts this year is the run defense. And the Broncos, I'm telling you, they're going to run the football more than 12 times, and I'll be very interested to see how it goes. Patrick Wright over in the YouTube chat calling a shot, saying that the Colts are going to win and the narrative will change at some point. Like I said, I'm not convinced. I'm taking the Broncos. I love that defense. When you have a defense that's that good, your floor is automatically raised. I know that Daniel Jones had one good game, but I'm just not convinced that he's going to be able to do it twice. So give me the Broncos minus 2.5. I hope I'm wrong. Shows are way more fun when the Colts are good. So like I said, I hope I'm wrong. I hope Daniel Jones has another big game, but I'm just not really counting on it. When we come back, Zack Gray, professional sports gambler, he's going to join the show. Very excited to have him on. He's going to give out bets. I'm going to give out bets. He's probably going to be right more than I am. and we'll see how it goes. So Zack Gray set to join the show when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on X, maybe you're watching or listening on the Indy Sports Ticket app at 1430 a.m. in the Indianapolis area. However you're listening, it's greatly appreciated. I really like that intro, and every time it plays, it makes me think of my guy, Zack Gray, who joins the show now, because I think I have the best takes. And then Zack Gray comes along and he's like, no, Jonathan, you do not have the best takes. And it's because I do. And then we argue, and it's great, and it's always a lot of fun. Zack, what's going on, man? How are you?
Smith, it's a great day to be a football fan. It's a Friday. The sun's out. It's hot again. And, yeah, it's just, my mouth doesn't hurt, so I'm feeling good.
Mine does, man. Like, so when you're explaining why you have different teams winning certain games, you just go, man. For listeners who don't know, I had a root canal. I'm in pain. I'm like watching the clock and I'm like 15 minutes and I'm done. So let's jump into it. Sharp versus Square. We started this 2 weeks ago. I didn't have a show on Friday because of the said root canal. So that's why we didn't do it last week. Zack Gray currently leading 1-0 after correctly taking Ohio State to cover against Texas. I was wrong. I had Baylor covering against Auburn. That didn't happen. So he's up 1-0, and we'll start our NFL Sharp versus Square this week. Do you want to start with college football or the NFL?
Let's just stick with college football, and then we can move on to the NFL. So I'll kick us off here, and I don't know how you want to do this because I gave this bet out at -5, and it is down to -3. If we want to stick with what I gave out, we can do that. But I have South Carolina covering -5. You can get it for -3 now. There's a lot of Vanderbilt hype, a lot of Vanderbilt steam, and I just don't see it, Jay Smith. I know Vanderbilt's plucky. I know they have a common opponent, and Vanderbilt looked better in the second half against Virginia Tech. But I don't know how many times I'm just going to have to say the word talent to people, especially in games like this. Vanderbilt does not have a Lenore Sellers. They do not have Nick Harbor. They do not have a why am I forgetting the edge rusher's name? But yeah, Vanderbilt doesn't have those type of guys. So that's why I like South Carolina at home, at night, SEC conference game. It seems easy to me, but everyone in the world is going against what I'm saying here.
Yeah, I waited. I got it at 3.5. And I'm with you. Like, when the number came out, like there's sometimes you get on FanDuel or DraftKings or whatever it is that you like to use, and you see a number and you almost don't want to bet it because it seems too good to be true. And when I saw the number get down to 3.5, that's kind of how I felt. And I haven't learned my lesson yet. I did take South Carolina -3.5, but I don't want to use the same bet as you. That's why I came prepared. I'm going to take Clemson -3.5 at Georgia Tech.
Wow.
I just like the idea of betting on a really talented football team a week after they didn't play to their expected level. So I think that they come out and play really well after a really bad showing against Troy last week.
So we're both going against the common theme of each game. Like everybody's on Vanderbilt and everybody's on Georgia Tech. So that's why this works.
It really is.
It works so well because we don't mess around. We don't subscribe to groupthink, Jay Smith. We're our own people. We make our own decisions. And just so you know, my model has South Carolina winning by over 8 points.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. Joined by Zack Gray, professional sports gambler. Probably should have said that at the top. You can check out his Patreon, which is linked in his X bio at ZG The Grapevine. Click that link and it'll take you to his Patreon where he sells tools to help you make better bets. This week's Sharp versus Square, he's taking South Carolina -5, and I've got Clemson -3.5. Talking about going against the grain, I love that. Like between you and the Sack Man, the two best sports gamblers I know, Zack Gray at the top, followed by the Sack Man, of course. That has been one of my big things. It's like I want to bet against everyone else because there's a reason why all these sports books make so much money.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, opinions are opinions, and those could be wrong, but you just have to whatever you're feeling. I know that you're an educated sports fan, so am I. Like, if there's data, if there's something that you feel like is an edge, take it, because most of the time, whatever the majority is thinking, that doesn't work out all the time. Sometimes the public gets lucky and has even a great weekend in football. But at the end of the day, that line is there to get action on both sides. So if there's a majority of people just hammering one side, there's a reason for that. So just not saying to always fade the public, but just be wary.
Okay, makes sense. You want to move on to the NFL?
I want to give out a bet tonight. I just posted it out on X, but I actually got this line early in the week, and it's actually benefiting us. But I have Colorado tonight +6 against Houston.
Oh, wow.
It's down to 4.5 right now, so we got a little bit of CLV on that game so far tonight. I believe in Ryan Staub. I believe in Coach Prime. I think Colorado makes this one close on the road at Houston. Don't know if they win outright. My model has it about a 2-point game. But yeah, give me Colorado tonight, and we can all talk about how Coach Prime is an idiot and doesn't know what he's doing, and he's starting his third-string quarterback. Every time something like that seems to happen, they seem to do something to shut people up. So give me Colorado tonight.
I like it. And go ahead and say your line, Zach. Go ahead. That is the value of the Patreon. If you go ahead. Go ahead and say it.
Yep, that's the value of it. We kind of had two examples there. One, we released these on Monday or Tuesday, and we got the best line possible. Right now, if you bet it, you're losing out on 1.5 points. If you would have got it on Tuesday when this was released, you would have gotten the absolute best line possible. So that's the value you see with the projections.
All right. NFL, I am very excited. Do you mind if I go first here?
Of course.
So I'm really stuck between two, but I'm going to go with the one that I think I like just a little bit more. I'm going to take the Patriots +1.5 on the road against Miami. I just think Miami's done. Like, when you're having to have a players-only meeting 1 week into the season after a very noisy offseason where it seems like things are anything but sunshine and rainbows down there in Miami, that's concerning. I like the Patriots +1.5.
We're both taking road dogs, Jonathan, because I have the Buccaneers +2.5 at Houston.
Really? I find that one interesting. I almost bet that one, but I just was a little hesitant with some of the injuries for Tampa Bay. What is it about that game that makes you want to bet that one?
Well, of course, the model has this one as Buccaneers as like a slight less than a point favorite there. I think that the Buccaneers offense is going to be very, very good. I think Emeka Egbuka showed you his value right off the bat in week 1. I think Baker's a gamer, and there's just something about the Texans right now that has me a little weary, and it's not a CJ Stroud problem, but it's just they're not clicking. They're not finding their potential, and we kind of saw that last year, even though they made the playoffs. I'm just on alert for the Texans to maybe be, somewhere in the top 10 of the draft this year, honestly. It seems like one of those years.
Yeah, CJ Stroud coming out, once again joined by a professional sports gambler, Zack Gray. If you want access to all of his picks, go follow him on X at ZG The Grapevine. Click the link in his bio. It'll take you to his Patreon where he sells tools to help you make better bets. Yeah, hearing CJ Stroud after a week 1 game say that they were lollygagging and they weren't coming out the way that they needed to, that's concerning. So I hope you're right, because I know if the Colts are good and the Colts have a chance to win the division, that makes my show so much better. Can I ask you about a line and how you would bet it?
Sure.
So I know that you're all about your model, and I'm going to assume that your model would tell you to bet Philly, but is there some part of you that just likes the idea of Patrick Mahomes getting points at home?
Oh, it's funny you say that. So you think my model is picking Philadelphia to cover?
Yeah, about like -2 or something like that. I think that their line's pretty close.
My model actually has this as a dead heat, 23-23.
Oh,
now,
wow.
Obviously, a game can end in a tie, but my model is leaning towards Chiefs covering.
Okay, that's interesting. But
that's interesting, right?
Yeah, But how do you weigh stuff like that? Like how do you weigh my model says this, but like my common knowledge knows that I like the idea of taking Mahomes getting points at home or just another situation like that?
So if there's a situation where if there's it's usually when there's a small edge like this, I usually stay away. But let's say that there's a game where my model says to take it, it's normally a play. There's a big edge, but there's something in the back of my head that's telling me, no, this isn't the right play. This isn't the right play. I usually, just to be disciplined and responsible better, I usually just stay away from that game, even though I have this strong urge to play a side. Because you know me, I know a lot about sports. I can feel things. I understand that. But there's certain times where the data and what I'm thinking conflict. And at that time, I don't want any bias to enter into my decision-making, any human error. I don't want that to ever enter into my decisions when I'm giving out bets. So I usually stay away.
That makes sense. So there's two college football games that I want to ask you about, and then I will let you go. Georgia and Tennessee, I'm just super intrigued by because I don't think that Syracuse is very good. Georgia hasn't really played anyone yet. What are you kind of expecting to see in that game?
It's a weird one, right? Because I think Tennessee might actually be good, and I think Georgia might actually be like not good. Like I'm kind of subscribing to everyone's like theories right now about both teams. But like, would it shock you if Georgia just thumped them if they won by like 20?
No,
and it was just not even like that's in the back of my head. Like, do I think that this Georgia team has looked good? I mean, when you beat an FCS school 28-6 at home, like that's pause for concern. They didn't look good. And then you see Tennessee doing what they're doing and kind of feeling like Aguilar is a perfect fit for that system. Like, yeah, Tennessee, go run wild with Tennessee. And then you look up after all the games are done Saturday and it's like Georgia won by 25. Like, I can fully see that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I'm kind of subscribing to everyone's opinions as well that Tennessee is really good and Georgia is going to be down again. So that's the game that I'm probably most interested in. And then, you know me, Zach, Notre Dame hater through and through.
Yes.
But I think I'd take them -6.5 against A&M.
Yeah.
I feel like A&M doesn't win games like that. A&M just doesn't seem to win games like these.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I said the same thing to a Notre Dame fan. I know. I was talking to him and I said, unfortunately, Notre Dame wins this game and they likely cover. That, you know, at the end of the day, I hate Notre Dame. They're my second least favorite football team in all of the world. But this is a game that they win. This is a prime spot for Notre Dame. Texas A&M, I think they're going to have a good year. I just think that losing to Miami is going to wake them up, especially with how they lost, with not giving Jeremiah Love the football. The offensive line struggles to run the football. I just think Notre Dame kind of sets the tone here early. And it reminds you of last year's game, but Notre Dame pulls away at the end just like they did, and I think they win by 10.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Like A&M makes a dumb mistake late, like a turnover or a bad penalty, stalls out a drive. Notre Dame responds with a score, and they end up winning by 10. Oh, by the way, congratulations to you. Bengals starting 1-0. Very weird week 1 with the Colts and Bengals both winning.
Yeah, I have no idea how they won that game, but I know that you can't really overreact to week 1 too much, but if there was ever a win that any team needed, it was the Bengals week 1. If they started out 0-1 again, Cincinnati would be up in flames. So at least getting a win to start the season gives a little bit of, room to breathe. Now they have a big game against Jacksonville. I think Travis Hunter is going to have a breakout game this weekend. I posted on X that I think he's going to score his first touchdown. I think he might even have 2 touchdowns on Sunday. But that's a huge game for the Bengals, 2-0, and it's on. Like, I think I even predicted early, in the preseason that I think the Bengals were an 11-12 win team. And I think if they win this game on Sunday, I think you really start to see them gel and vault into that potential 1 seed in the AFC. But they need to get off to a start where they're at least 2-0, 3-1, 4-2, something like that for that to happen.
Totally agree. Zach, thanks for your time. Thanks for the bets. Hopefully I can even up the scoreboard this week.
Probably not, but I appreciate you, Jason.
See you, buddy. That is Zack Gray. Go and check him out on X at ZG. The Grapevine. Check out his Patreon, linked in his bio, where he sells tools to help you make better bets. I'm done. I will talk to you on Monday, 10 to noon. I'm going to go and rest my jaw. I will talk to you on Monday.